Hi, I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today at the Future of Aging conference. In particular, I'd like to thank EY, Sanofi, Legal & General, the Phoenix Group, and United for All Ages for their support, which has allowed today to happen. Of course, no family or individual has been unaffected by COVID-19, and arguably the youngest amongst us and the oldest amongst us have been hit the heaviest. Our lives are certainly different. Our commute has been replaced by sourdough bread, our day in the office replaced by laptops on the kitchen table and competitions with other generations for Wi-Fi, our family visit replaced by the Zoom quiz, our trip to the shops replaced by online shopping and click and collect coffee. And of course, this year we've realised how much we rely on other generations, how much we rely on our parents, our children, our carers, our teachers. What COVID has done is expose the extent to which generations do need each other. And at the same time, what's happened, of course, is joy and grief has been put on hold for many. Funerals, people haven't been able to grieve properly. People have, had planned weddings that have not been able to take place. So the world isn't as we expected. I suppose what I wanted to argue in the few minutes we've got today is how our economy really does rely on generations coming together, how our health relies on us all coming together, and how our community relies on us all coming together, and that and of course, in many ways, we're still struggling with intergenerational tensions, intergenerational issues. Just over half of younger people aged 18 to 29 voted in the American presidential election, and it's very clear that there was different attitudes towards voting by age. Of course, what COVID has done is also exposed some of the issues around vulnerability, ableism, and ageism. And what you see here is the growth in global Google search trends for vulnerable and for elderly, and you see a very, very significant spike in March that happened across the world. Of course, what's happened is that the way we work has changed. Of course, clearly, it's very obvious. COVID has, in terms of employment rates, had very significant impact on the youngest amongst us and in terms of the oldest. And of course, we have had initiatives in the UK such as Kickstart to support younger workers. Clearly, there's a very strong case to support older workers. It's still the case, though, that intergenerational workplaces aren't the norm, and I think we've got to do more in this space. At ILC, we have staff in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I think really clear that it is possible and doable, but we need to make sure that employers are supported and that employees and older and younger workers are supported to work together. We did a bit of work earlier this year on the case for midlife career interventions, for example, and I suppose what's really clear is that the importance of initiatives across the life course to support us to continue to work into old age. What's also really clear is that spending isn't a young person's game. We've seen in the last couple of weeks, Specsavers have, for example, announced a very big growth in the number of their stores. As you'll see, I've found myself having to wear glasses for the first time. There is, our eyesight almost inevitably goes as we get older. This is going to be one of the many industries that is likely to grow. At the same time, what COVID has potentially, pushed ahead quicker than we would expect is the move towards local economies. We did some work with Manchester earlier this year, which highlighted the importance not just of Manchester city centre, but also of local towns, town centres. And it's likely that this trend will continue, and it will be extremely important for both young and old that we get local town centres working for all. Um, there is, of course, growing recognition of the spending power of all generations, and the work we did on the global longevity dividend this year highlighted, for example, that across the G20, 9.7 trillion US dollars was spent by older households, which was the equivalent GDP of Japan, Australia, Canada, and Brazil combined. So there is a growing recognition of the importance of older and not just younger people as consumers. There is also growing recognition of the importance of caring done by all of us. The work we did again showed that the unpaid contributions of older people were worth more than what the EU spends on defence. And what we've also shown this year is that prevention works, and prevention is extraordinarily important at all ages. We found that employment spending rates at older ages are higher in countries that spend more on health as a percentage of GDP, that have higher flu vaccination rates, and that have higher healthier older populations. Similarly, people volunteer more. And spend more, in countries where we are spending more on health and where older people are healthier. So, one I suppose debate we need to, change is this sort of artificial health versus wealth argument. The reality is we need good health for our economies to thrive. And our work on the global longevity dividend highlighted that prevention not only lowers treatment costs but supports the wider economy. Increasing prevention spend, and this is prevention at all ages, could by just 0.1% could unlock a 9% increase in spending by older people and attract 10 more volunteer hours per older person each year. There's very significant benefits for all ages of investing in prevention. Of course, predicting the future is a fool's game, but back in last September, we did a piece of work which highlighted the real risk to older populations of future pandemics. We highlighted the extent to which in an aging society older people were more likely to be susceptible to infectious diseases. We weren't the only people saying this, because Bill Gates, others have been saying this for many years. We knew this was coming. And similarly, looking forward, there are things we know are coming. We know that longevity will have an impact on the way young and old live together. We know that climate change will change the way we live. We know that unless we can find new antibiotics, antimicrobial resistance could destroy the progress we've been making around health. So I think what COVID has to do is get us a bit more prepared for some of these long-term challenges which we know are coming down our road. Of course, what might the world look like? How might governments adapt? Some interesting work by the Zukunft Institute in Germany that talks about, either a retreat into, on the negative side, a retreat into localism, into isolation where everyone's against each other, or where we go from a permanent crisis mode, or an adaptation mode. And I think, who knows? On the one hand, in some ways, that there are some really positive signs. Organisations like the World Economic Forum, like Milken, have started talking about the need for new economies, redesigning new economies which balance people, planets, and prosperity. Look at new measures of GDP. So there's some really interesting organisations starting to sort of paint a picture of a world that might be different from the one we've had before, but actually where there is potential for us all to thrive at a global level. Of course, what COVID-19 will do is it will accelerate some of the pressures and the changes on all generations around, how we live, how we work, how we explore, how we're governed, how we stay healthy. And clearly we could do a whole presentation on each of these issues, but the world is going to change. It's going to change for all generations, and extraordinarily important whether we're looking at the future of retirement housing or the future of money, whether we're looking at robotics and care, whether we're looking at the way in which we move around town, cycling, walking, that we start to take more of a generational approach. And undoubtedly over the next few years all of these trends are going to be accelerated. So what happens next? What's our role? I think we plan to be doing some work publishing some work early in the new year, and there's been a debate today around the extent to which Gen X are prepared for retirement. We're doing some work on the where we live. We're doing a big program of work with IRC for HR on what work is going to look like in the future. We're doing a really interesting innovation project, ethnographic program in Japan. And we're doing a lot more with the ILC Global Alliance. So we plan to be looking at all of these issues in terms of all of these issues and with a COVID lens, of course. So I'm going to finish by just saying, again, I think what's extraordinary. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to EY, Sanofi, Legal and General, and Phoenix. I think it's extraordinarily important that we do all recognise that our economy, our health, our communities all rely on all of us working together.